Hello, you're on the Reddit Reveals channel. There's a bottle of champagne in my fridge with a sticky note on it that says, "For the day she leaves." My mom wrote that. She put it there the week she moved in with us, 2 years ago, right after the diagnosis. She had stage 4 cancer and zero faith in my marriage. I remember laughing when I saw the note. I said, "Mom, you're ridiculous." She looked at me like I was the child she raised to be smarter than this. She was never wrong. I never opened that bottle. Not even the night Delilah told me she was leaving. Not when I found the hidden bank account. Not even when her lawyer sent the laughable list of demands. But I'm chilling it now. Because today I learned what my mother did behind my back. And for the first time since the funeral, I'm smiling. Let me rewind. My mother passed away 6 weeks ago. She died in the upstairs bedroom we gave her. The one with the creaky ceiling fan, she said, sounded like an old man snoring. We kept the door closed after she was gone. Couldn't bear the smell of lavender lotion and faded memory. I took time off work. Stopped checking email. Canceled game night with my friends. I just stopped existing. Meanwhile, my wife, my lovely, patient, unreadable wife, kept living. She kept going to Pilates. She kept posting quotes on Instagram like, "Don't dim your light for people who can't handle your shine." She kept being calm. Too calm. Then came the funeral. She didn't cry. She wore black like a model walking a runway. And she said all the right things. Ruth was one of a kind. She'll be missed dearly. But when she thought no one was looking, I caught her smiling. Just for a second. A tiny smirk. Not grief. Not relief. Something else. 3 days later, I found a printed itinerary on her desk. Flights. Hotel bookings. Miami. Solo trip. For days later, she served me papers. Divorce. Just like that. I was still eating the leftover casseroles our neighbors dropped off after the funeral. She was dividing assets. She didn't even wait for the estate to be settled. Didn't ask what mom left. She just assumed. She knew Ruth had money. Knew I was the only child. Knew the house, the stocks, the insurance. All of it would soon be ours. Correction, mine. She wanted half. Expected half. But she didn't know what I'd find when I visited my mom's attorney last week. It wasn't just a will. It was a weapon. A plan forged in love, sharpened by suspicion, and aimed straight at Delilah's greed. And at the center of it, a sealed envelope addressed to me. No return address. Just 5 words in my mother's handwriting. Don't open until she runs. I opened it this morning. Now everything's different. I sat at the kitchen table with the envelope in front of me for 6 straight hours. I didn't eat. I didn't drink. I didn't move except to rub my thumb across her handwriting. Don't open until she runs. The sentence pulsed in my head like a warning, like a whisper from beyond. Mom knew. She always knew. When I finally opened it, my hands were shaking so bad I ripped the flap clean off. Inside was a single page, handwritten in blue ink, her favorite pen, the one she used for crossword puzzles and birthday cards. "Wally, my darling boy, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And so is she. I'm sorry for both. But you need to know that I saw her long before you did. You saw love. I saw strategy. You gave her everything. She only ever wanted what wasn't hers." That was the first paragraph. I had to stop reading because my eyes flooded. I wiped my face on my sleeve and kept going. I didn't want to interfere. I truly didn't. I wanted to believe I was just being overprotective, but then I overheard her. 2 years ago, when she thought I was asleep on the patio, she was on the phone with someone. She said you were soft and predictable. She said, and I quote, "He'll never suspect a thing. He worships me too much to ever look under the surface." That night, I changed everything. I blinked. My ears started ringing. It felt like my mother was sitting across from me, pulling strings from the afterlife. She'd changed her will. But she hadn't just changed it. She'd engineered it like a chess master. The estate wasn't coming directly to me. Instead, every penny was locked inside a trust, with a list of stipulations that made my jaw drop. Here's the kicker. If I stayed married to Delilah for longer than 6 months after Mom's death, the trust would default to charity. Not me. Not Delilah. Gone. But, and this is where it gets twisted, if Delilah initiated the divorce within those 6 months, I'd retain 100% control. She'd get nothing. Not even a cent. It was a trap. A clean, perfect, mother-forged trap. Ruth had set the bait, grief, estate, timing, and Delilah stepped right into it. The woman who always had to be in control, who couldn't stand to wait, had played herself. I was stunned. My mouth was dry. It was so brilliant and so cruel that I didn't know whether to laugh or sob. Mom wasn't done, though. There was one more line, scrawled at the very bottom. If she leaves before 6 months, pop that bottle in the fridge. You earned it, sweetheart. Love, Mom. I stood there, letter in hand, while Delilah packed in the bedroom upstairs. She had no idea what she'd just given up. No idea she'd pulled the trigger on her own financial execution. And the best part? I didn't have to lift a finger. All I had to do was wait. Until her Uber pulled out of the driveway. I still thought maybe she'd come down, tearfully apologize, say she made a mistake. But she didn't. She left a note. A soulless, printed note that read, "This isn't working anymore. Please don't make this harder than it needs to be." That's when I went to the fridge and grabbed the champagne. I didn't open it. Not yet. Because something was still bothering me. Something the letter didn't explain. Why was my mom so certain Delilah would leave? Why had she gone to such lengths, instead of just telling me? And then I remembered something strange. A storage unit key my mom had given me at the hospital 2 days before she passed. I had shoved it in a drawer and forgotten all about it. She said, "Don't open it until the dust settles." Well, the dust just exploded. And tomorrow, I'm going to find out what's inside that unit. If what I've learned so far is just the beginning, then what's coming might be the real firestorm. I barely slept the night before visiting the storage unit. My body was tired, but my brain wouldn't shut up. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Mom's handwriting. She only ever wanted what wasn't hers. The trust, the timing, the champagne. I thought that was the end of it. I thought I had the whole picture. But apparently, my mom had left breadcrumbs beyond the grave, and I had a key to follow them. The storage facility was on the edge of town, tucked between an abandoned bowling alley and a dusty car wash that still had a coming soon sign from 2019. The guy at the front desk scanned the key and pointed me to Unit 217. No clipboard. No questions. Just a tired glance and a muttered, "Good luck, man," as if he knew. The metal door groaned when I rolled it up. Inside, the unit looked surprisingly clean. There were maybe 6 plastic bins stacked against the back wall, a vintage cedar chest, a covered armchair, and, right in the center, a small metal safe the size of a microwave. I knew instantly that was what she wanted me to find. I carried it to the car without even touching the other boxes. Didn't need to. I felt something coiled in my gut, something primal, telling me this was it. This was the second half of the story. Back home, I stared at the safe like it might hiss or explode. I didn't have the code, but I had something better, the memory of my mom's favorite date. February 7th, the day she adopted me, not the day I was born. She always called it our real beginning. I punched in 0207. It clicked open. There were no stacks of cash, no gold or jewelry or mysterious documents. Just a manila folder, a flash drive, and a folded newspaper clipping dated June 11th, 2021, a full year before my mother's diagnosis. The headline read, "Prominent divorce attorney suspended following ethics violation." At first, I didn't get it. The name didn't ring a bell. Terrence Holloway. But when I flipped to the article, my blood ran cold. Delilah had worked as this guy's executive assistant before she left to pursue creative ventures, which I always assumed meant expensive lattes and yoga. I never thought much about her time at that firm. She said it was toxic. Rich men with fragile egos trying to screw over their wives, she used to say. But according to the article, Holloway had been caught using confidential client information to coach their spouses on how to secretly build leverage, hidden finances, private recordings, asset transfers. It was a scheme, one where both parties were in on it, until he got greedy and sloppy. I sat there staring at the name for 10 minutes. It was like a heat wave spread through my brain. If Delilah had learned from this man, worked beside him for years, then maybe she hadn't just walked away from our marriage when it stopped being fun. Maybe she'd been planning her exit for years. And maybe my mother had found out. The flash drive confirmed it. There were 3 video files, all from hidden cameras inside our own house. Date-stamped and tagged by room. I didn't know my mother had installed cameras. I didn't know they even made me feel this way, violated, confused, horrified, until I watched the first clip. Delilah was in the kitchen, on the phone, pacing back and forth while I was upstairs working. She said, and I quote, "He's not dumb, just too decent to snoop. I need another 2 months, max. The life insurance hits after probate, and I can file while he's still in therapy." He'll be too numb to fight. She laughed. She laughed. I sat there on the couch with the laptop burning into my thighs and my face flushed with shame. My marriage, the entire architecture of it, had been rotting long before I noticed the cracks. The second video was worse. She was in the guest room, drinking wine with a man I didn't recognize. Not kissing, not touching, just talking. But the things they were saying were worse than infidelity. I told him I'd never want kids, she said, swirling her glass. But if the trust gets split by next spring, I might suddenly change my mind. He smirked. That's dark, D. And she replied, no, that's survival. That word, survival. It echoed in my skull for hours after, because it meant she never saw me as her partner. She saw me as a means of escape, a financial life raft, a man stupid enough to keep loving her while she dug a tunnel out the back. And yet, I still missed her. Isn't that pathetic? After everything, I still had the urge to hear her voice. I even hovered over her contact in my phone, thumb trembling. But I didn't call her. Instead, I opened the last video. And what I saw in that one wasn't about Delilah at all. It was about someone else. Someone who wasn't supposed to be there. Someone who may have helped her from the inside. There's a kind of silence that settles over you when your reality starts unraveling. Not the dramatic kind. No screaming, no glass shattering. Just the low hum of your breath slowing down as your brain processes a version of the truth you were never supposed to see. That's where I was when I hit play on the final video file. It started like the others. Grainy angle, static in the corner. The guest bedroom, late at night. I could see the edge of the bed, the closet door, the window my mom always hated because the blinds rattled in the wind. At first, there was no one in the frame. Just the soft sound of voices from another room. Then a figure walked in. It wasn't Delilah. It was Cameron, my best friend since we were 14. The guy who introduced me to chess, who helped me survive sophomore year gym class when I couldn't climb the damn rope. He was the best man at my wedding. Gave a toast that made half the room cry. When Mom got sick, he was the one who brought soup over, who sat with her when I needed a break. I trusted him with everything. My home, my grief, my secrets. And there he was, sitting on the edge of my guest bed in the dark, looking far too comfortable. The door opened again. Delilah stepped inside, barefoot, wearing the hoodie I thought she'd left behind when she packed. My hoodie, she said. Did you talk to him? Cameron shook his head. He's still in the fog. He won't push. Good, she said. Because we're almost there. I paused the video. I had to. My throat had closed up, like I'd swallowed barbed wire. I stared at Cameron's frozen face on the screen, trying to remember every moment I'd ever spent with him. All the nights we sat in my garage drinking cheap beer and talking about life. All the times he told me I was too good for this world. Was it all a lie? I unpaused. Delilah sat beside him, not touching, but too close. We need to make sure the assets stay clean, she said. If he contests anything, it gets messy. He won't. Trust me. He's wired to avoid conflict. They weren't lovers, at least, not in this clip. But what they were was worse. They were co-conspirators. Strategists. They had studied me. My tendencies. My blind spots. My grief. She used our marriage. He used our friendship. Together, they built a plan. And my mother? She saw enough to install cameras. She must have suspected him too, but she never said a word to me. I wondered if she held her tongue to protect me from even deeper heartbreak. Or maybe she didn't have time to finish the puzzle before the cancer one. Either way, she left me the tools, and I hadn't been ready to use them. Until now. The hardest part? There was a line in that clip that keeps circling my thoughts like a wasp in a closed room. Delilah said, he'll thank us someday. He'll be free. Free? From what? From my own life? From the illusion of loyalty? Was I so pitiful in their eyes that betrayal felt like a favor? I slammed the laptop shut and sat in the dark for over an hour. Max, my dog, curled up next to me like he knew I was unraveling thread by thread. I didn't cry. Not that night. I just stared at the wall and made a silent vow I hadn't made in years. I would not let this break me. I may have been the quiet one, the soft one, the forgettable guy in the background. But I wasn't stupid, and I sure as hell wasn't done. They wanted me to fade. They expected silence, compliance, a signature at the bottom of a divorce settlement, and maybe a half-hearted text 6 months later. But that's not what they're getting. Because tomorrow morning, I'm calling my mother's lawyer. And I'm going to ask about something she wrote in her will, a clause I'd skimmed over before, but now burned in my memory. In the event of dual-party conflict involving both spousal betrayal and third-party coercion, the secondary package shall be released. Secondary package? She was 10 steps ahead of all of us. And I have a feeling whatever's inside that package is going to burn what's left of their scheme to the ground. It's funny how paperwork becomes sacred when it's the last thing someone ever touched. My mom's will had been sitting in a drawer, mostly untouched since the funeral. I hadn't wanted to revisit it. Too much pain. Too final. But now it felt like a map, a final path she carved out just for me. One more way to protect me from people I couldn't even admit were hurting me while they were smiling to my face. I brought the whole binder to my mother's lawyer, Mr. Darnell. He was an older gentleman with gray eyebrows that looked permanently surprised and a voice that sounded like it had marinated in bourbon for 3 decades. He'd worked with my mom for over 15 years, and when I walked into his office holding the trust binder and said, "I need to ask about the secondary package," he went still like a machine switching off. "You sure you want that?" he asked, looking at me like I had just whispered a code phrase that might set off a bomb. I nodded. He didn't argue. He disappeared into a locked file cabinet behind his desk and pulled out a flat black envelope sealed with wax. Literal wax. It had my mom's initials carved into the stamp, R.L., like some medieval message that could only be opened by the heir to a secret kingdom. Darnell handed it over without a word and left me in the room to open it alone. I broke the seal with my fingernail, my hands already sweating. Inside were 2 things: a signed affidavit and a USB drive marked with a red sticker that simply read, "Do not ignore." The affidavit was short, dated 10 months before my mom passed. It stated that she had been approached by an anonymous party who offered to purchase sensitive financial information involving Delilah and a third party, my best friend, Cameron. It claimed that the buyer was working on behalf of Cameron's ex-wife, who had been suspicious of his finances and possible collusion in her divorce case. According to the document, this party offered my mother a sizable amount of money to disclose any irregularities she may have discovered while living under the same roof as both Delilah and Cameron. She declined, but instead of staying out of it, she did what only my mom would have done. She investigated on her own. I plugged in the USB. My breath caught in my throat the moment the folder loaded. It was a financial web, bank statements, wire transfers, offshore holding structures, and digital screenshots of conversations Delilah had clearly tried to delete. My mom had hired a digital forensic investigator. She must have paid him off the books because I'd never seen anything about this in her check register. She'd compiled everything, a damning, time-stamped trail of transactions between Delilah and someone using the alias Morgan A. A quick reverse lookup revealed what made my stomach drop. Morgan A. was an account manager at a private wealth firm that Cameron's ex-wife had publicly accused of mishandling funds during their own divorce. So now, it wasn't just about betrayal. It was fraud. Coordinated, deliberate fraud. Delilah and Cameron hadn't just been planning to drain my future, they had done it before. To someone else. To multiple people, most likely. And my mother, dying of cancer, had uncovered it all while pretending to be a fragile old woman in the upstairs bedroom. The true weight of it hit me in a way I can't explain. She'd spent her final months not only preparing for death, but building a weapon for me. A safe, silent, precise bomb to be used only when I was ready to accept that my marriage had never been a marriage. That my best friend had never been a friend. That I had been loved only as far as I was useful. I sat in Darnell's office, shaking, eyes glassy, and asked the only question that made sense. What do I do with this? His answer was cold and clear. You end it. Legally. Publicly. Permanently. So that's what I'm doing. The next morning, I sent a copy of the affidavit and drive to a financial crimes attorney. I filed an ethics complaint with the state bar against the firm Delilah once worked for. I flagged Cameron's name in connection to an open fraud investigation tied to his ex-wife's lawsuit. And then I had Darnell send Delilah's lawyer a polite little message. We are no longer open to negotiation. Your client may wish to retain criminal counsel. She hasn't responded yet. Neither has Cameron. But I know they will. I know that silence is the sound of panic. The sound of a plan collapsing. And while I wait, I've started packing up the house. I can't live here anymore. Too many ghosts. Too many memories that were never real. I boxed up the wedding photos first. Not out of bitterness, but because I finally saw them for what they were, evidence. Snapshots of a man who smiled harder than he should have, standing next to a woman who already had one foot out the door. And then I found the champagne again, still in the fridge, still sealed. I almost opened it. But no, not yet. Because there's still one more move to make. One more card to play. And it's the one Delilah will never see coming. I didn't call her. I didn't text. I knew if I gave her time to prepare, she'd show up rehearsed. Delilah doesn't walk into a room without a script in her head and a backup plan in her purse. So I did something she wouldn't expect. I dropped by her new condo in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon, unannounced, holding 2 coffees and a brown paper bag with muffins from her favorite bakery. The kind of bakery that spelled your name on the bag even if you were the only one in the place. She opened the door with a look of cautious curiosity, already calculating. Her eyes did that flicker thing, checking me for tells, scanning the muffins like they might be poisoned. "Wallace," she said. "This is the surprise. I thought maybe we could talk," I replied. Calm. Simple. Nothing sharp. She stepped aside to let me in, her expression unreadable, but I could see it behind her eyes. He doesn't know yet. Or maybe, he doesn't have proof. That's what she was hoping. Betting on. She always did. Her condo was sterile, not yet lived in. A new couch. No photos. One houseplant already dying in a corner. She gestured toward the kitchen island, and we sat like old colleagues pretending to be friends again. I handed her the coffee. She took it, but didn't sip. I let the silence linger, let it thicken until she finally broke. "So, how have you been?" "Busy," I said. "Lawyers. Paperwork. Funeral logistics. Grief. You know how it is." She nodded, eyes softening like she thought I might still be salvageable. "I didn't want it to be this way, Wally." "Didn't want what?" She hesitated. "The divorce. I couldn't stay. We were suffocating. You weren't happy. You stopped trying." There it was. The narrative. She'd already rewritten history in her head, painted herself as the woman who was brave enough to walk away from a dying marriage. "Do you remember when my mom moved in?" I asked, staring into my coffee like it might answer for me. She blinked. "Of course. She told me once, right after her second chemo session, that she thought you were preparing an exit." Delilah's mouth twitched. Not a flinch, a calculated flicker of annoyance. "She never liked me." "No, she didn't," I said. "But she respected intelligence. And she had a pretty good radar for performance." Now she stiffened. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," I said, slowly, "that I know everything. The bank accounts, the financial trail, the phone recordings, the Morgan wire transfers, the nights you thought I was upstairs asleep when you were making deals in the guest room." Her face went white. That brief composure, the polished calm, gone. Like a glass surface shattering under pressure. "You've been spying on me," she hissed, a whisper full of venom. "My mother was," I corrected. Long before I was ready to believe she had a reason to. She stood up, walked across the kitchen like the motion could somehow reset the room. Like if she moved fast enough, she could dodge this moment. "You don't know what you're talking about," she said, back to me now. "You don't know the full picture." "I do," I said. "But I want to hear your version." Silence. I waited. Let her stew in it. Let the panic settle into her spine like a slow frost. When she turned back around, she looked more tired than I'd ever seen her. Not guilty. Not broken. Just exposed. Like a magician caught mid-trick. "Fine," she said. "I made a plan. I had to. You weren't going anywhere. You were content to stay in that house with your dying mother and your spreadsheets and your golden retriever. I wanted more. I've always wanted more. So you partnered with my best friend behind my back? Cameron is smarter than you give him credit for." That was a mistake. Saying his name like a shield. Like he was still part of her strategy. I smiled, not warmly. "He's under investigation," I said. "Your financial connections to him, the holding accounts, the masked routing, all of it is with the state now. And you? You're about a week away from becoming very, very interesting to a few very bored prosecutors." Her hands clenched. The bravado cracked. "What do you want from me?" she whispered. That was the first real question she'd asked. "I want nothing," I said. "That's the difference between us. You think life is about transactions, about leverage. But I'm not here to get something out of you. I just wanted you to see that I know. Fully, clearly, completely." She looked at me like a stranger. And maybe that's what we'd always been. I stood up, tossed the untouched muffin bag on the counter. "You should eat," I said. "You're going to need your strength." And then I walked out. Not triumphantly, not smug, just free. Finally, the morning after I confronted Delilah, I expected to wake up feeling lighter, vindicated, unburdened. I thought there'd be some kind of release, like finishing a book or slamming a door shut on a chapter of your life that no longer deserved to be open. But that feeling never came. I woke up to silence. Not peace, just the kind of quiet that feels like it's pressing in from all sides. Max didn't even bark when the mail was dropped off. He just sat by the front window, staring at the street like he was waiting for someone to come home who never would. The fallout came fast. 2 days after the confrontation, I got a call from Darnell, my mother's lawyer. His voice was clipped, like he'd aged 10 years since our last meeting. The financial crimes attorney I'd given the USB to had already passed it along to federal investigators. Turns out there was more to the Morgan account than just clever routing. That account linked to a larger, dormant shell company tied to fraudulent asset management practices. Not just shady, illegal. The moment they traced Delilah's and Cameron's communications to that network, the case escalated. Officially, formally, and publicly. By the end of the week, Cameron's face was on a local news segment under the headline, "Fraud Allegations Emerge in Quiet Suburbs Divorce Scandal." A still image of him leaving a courthouse in sunglasses played while the reporter explained that several unnamed individuals may have been complicit in a long-standing financial scheme designed to exploit divorcing clients. He looked like a kid caught cheating on a test, stunned, indignant, but mostly small. Delilah wasn't named. Not yet. But she would be. That part was inevitable, and I thought I was ready for it. I thought I'd welcome it. But when I opened my inbox and saw an email from her that simply said, "Please, can we talk?" Something in my chest didn't feel victorious. It felt hollow. I didn't reply, but I kept rereading it. Not because I cared what she had to say. I didn't. I couldn't. Not after everything. But because part of me still wanted to understand why. Not the logistics. I knew those now. I'd mapped them, studied them, picked them apart like a forensic scientist studying his own autopsy. But the why behind the betrayal still felt like a question mark carved into my ribs. And then came the second cost, one I hadn't prepared for. My mother's estate was now under scrutiny, not for wrongdoing, but because she'd assembled such a detailed archive of financial activity. Her name was being pulled into investigations she never asked for. Her records, her emails, her storage unit contents, all of it was now evidence. The trust account was frozen until things could be verified, cataloged, examined. The money she meant to give me to rebuild, to move on, was locked behind red tape and subpoenas. And that wasn't even the worst of it. Darnell informed me that someone, likely Delilah's lawyer, had filed an emergency motion to dispute the will. They were claiming that my mother acted out of malicious interference, that she unethically surveilled her daughter-in-law, and that the trust terms constituted psychological entrapment. I could barely breathe reading those words. My mother, dying, trying to protect me with everything she had, was being painted as manipulative, vindictive. "They're desperate," Darnell said. "This is what desperate people do. It won't hold." But I wasn't so sure. I wasn't worried about losing money. I could live broke. I'd done it before. But I couldn't live with the idea of her memory being dragged through the mud, of her name becoming a tool in some courtroom circus designed to protect a fraud and a coward. I couldn't let that be the final chapter in her legacy. Not after what she did for me. Not after what she saw coming before I ever opened my eyes. So I did the one thing I swore I wouldn't. I met Delilah again. This time, not in her home and not mine. Neutral ground. A park bench in the middle of an overcast afternoon, the kind of setting that didn't allow for drama or spectacle. Just two people, sitting on opposite ends of a collapsing bridge. She looked thinner, not in the way that worries you, in the way that says someone has been trying too hard to control something. Her hair was tied back, no makeup, oversized coat. For once, she didn't seem polished. She just seemed real. It was disarming. "I'm not here for closure," I said. "I don't want reconciliation. I don't want apologies." She nodded. "Then why did you come?" "Because you're trying to rewrite the story," I said. "And you don't get to." She looked away, jaw clenched. I saw something shift in her posture. A flicker of shame, or maybe just exhaustion. For once, she didn't fight. "I never wanted to hurt your mother," she said quietly. "I just wanted to get out." "You could have left," I said. "Years ago. Clean. With your dignity." "I didn't think I'd get anything if I did." There it was. The honest rot at the core of it all. Everything you touched, I said. You touched with calculation. Even love. Especially love. And now you want the world to believe she was the manipulative one? I'm trying to survive, she said, almost pleading. You don't know what it's like. No, I cut her off. You don't know what it's like. To have your mother's name twisted because someone like you decided greed was easier than integrity. She didn't cry. She just sat there. For once, she had no play left. I stood up, leaving her there on the bench. I'm not done fighting. The hearing is scheduled in 2 weeks. I'll be there, with every document, every timestamp, every email my mother collected while dying. She may not be here to speak, but I will, and I'll say it loud enough for the judge, the lawyers, and Delilah to hear. She saw what I refused to, and she saved me anyway. The courtroom was silent. Not tense, not hostile, just quiet. The kind of stillness that only comes when everyone in the room knows the outcome, but they're waiting for someone else to say it out loud. The hearing had taken most of the morning. Delilah sat across the room with her attorney, both of them performing calm professionalism like it was a school play. Her eyes never met mine. She wore a navy blue blazer like she wanted to appear stable, controlled, but her hands kept fidgeting with the pen in front of her. That pen spun between her fingers like a nervous metronome. The judge, a sharp, no-nonsense woman with steel-gray hair and glasses that lived on the edge of her nose, leaned forward and delivered her decision. The court finds no merit in the claim that the deceased acted with malicious intent. In fact, the evidence presented demonstrates a consistent, well-documented effort to protect her son from fraud and exploitation. The trust remains valid. The terms of the estate are to be honored, and the emergency motion to freeze the inheritance is denied in full. Just like that, it was over. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I didn't even look at Delilah. I just sat there, still, like the floor had finally stopped shifting beneath me. There was no applause, no cinematic crescendo, just a gentle, internal quiet that I hadn't felt in what felt like years. And then the judge did something unexpected. She cleared her throat and said, "There's one last item, Mr. Langston." She motioned to the bailiff, who brought forward a sealed envelope. A real envelope, yellowed slightly at the edges, hand-addressed in blue ink. To Wallace, for when it's over. My mother's handwriting. I hadn't known it existed. Darnell later told me she had left it with instructions to be handed to me only after the trust had been resolved. She wanted it to be the last word, not the first. Classic Ruth. I took it home. Sat on the back porch with Max curled up at my feet, a breeze rustling through the leaves, the sky warm and gold with the end of the day. I opened it. Wally, if you're reading this, you've already survived more than most people do in a lifetime. I never wanted you to become hardened or bitter. I just wanted you to see clearly. I knew she didn't love you the way you deserved, but I also knew you wouldn't believe it until you saw it for yourself. That's okay. That's what made you good. Now comes the part no one talks about. What to do after the fire burns out. You rebuild. You rest. You fall in love with something. Maybe not someone just yet, but something. A new routine. A quiet morning. A messy project. Life is bigger than betrayal, sweetheart. I'm proud of you. Love. Mom. Asterisk. I cried harder than I had the day she died. Not because I was sad, but because she had known. She had understood what would break me and what would remake me. That weekend, I started boxing up more than just the past. I started planning what came next. I sold the house. I donated most of the furniture, kept only what mattered. A few photo albums, a chess set Cameron once gave me that I decided to burn in the fire pit, and my mom's teacup collection. And then I left. I moved to the mountains, not far, just enough to breathe. A little rental with creaky floors, too much light in the mornings, and a porch that looks out at pine trees instead of streetlights. Max loves it here. So do I. I started teaching night classes at a local community center, financial literacy. Turns out, a lot of people have no idea how to manage money, and I do. It feels good to give something real, something honest. And one night, after class, a woman stayed behind to ask a question. Not flirtatiously, just curious. She had ink on her hands from grading papers, wore old Converse sneakers, and spoke like someone who didn't care if she was overheard. She made me laugh before I even realized I needed to. We got coffee the next week. Just coffee. And when I told her my name, she said, Wallace, like the poet or the knight. And for the first time in a long time, I said, maybe both. because I survived something that almost ended me. And now? Now I live. Not bitter, not broken, just awake. And that, in the end, is the most brutal and beautiful kind of revenge.